Kerri.
We both jamming. I was loving it.
I love that. I love our opening song.
Mm.
It's
Well,
just
I have lyrics pumping through my head right now because I was just on like a 5 mile walk, and it's not
mm.
that, but it's still peppy. So we're both jamming.
What were you listening to?
Uh if your world falls apart, I'll start a riot for you. There you go.
I like
It's
that.
start a riot. It like random music comes up in my world all the time, and I just jam out to it.
That's my favorite though. I totally, and I know I'm gonna guess that you'll say yes to this, but I totally believe that when a song pops on and we hear it in our reality, that we're meant to, like, we need that song in that moment. It's some divine message somehow, some way.
Yeah, so before we touch upon that, because there's a beautiful story that I can tie into that. Who are you, beautiful soul?
I am Michelle Barone of Moksha Grace Coaching, and I am an emotional liberation coach. And I help people through fear. I help people find their strength to see the world differently. How
I
about
love
you?
I am Kerri Lewis, and I love to talk. So I talk and I teach and I speak. And in doing so, my passion and purpose is to help people heal.
And
That's what I'm sticking to today anyway. Who knows? It could change tomorrow. But anyway.
I like the part of we like to talk because we do.
Yeah. Well,
We
since you
do.
touched upon music, it's interesting. Last Thursday, I went to go to my great uncle's funeral, and prior, the night before, he
Mhm.
used to sing in like this men's quartet, and so all these men showed up in front of his casket, and they sang this song, and I'm like, oh well, that's cool, right? It's an old song, right? Then the next morning, I'm getting ready to attend his funeral. Now, funerals for me are very different than funerals for most people. I show up in love for the people who were there, not so
Mhm.
much for, the person who's moved on. But
Right.
the same song played on my radio. I'm like, oh, okay, I see you. I feel
Mhm.
what you're putting down. So it's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. So background Greek culture. My grand my grandmother used to drag me to funerals like I was probably 4. But Greek funerals are very much a party. Like they're lively. Like
Yeah.
yes, there's some solemn parts to it, and if it's done in the church, then there's a whole service. But otherwise, it's like the wakes and stuff. Like I've never been afraid of it. We used to have picnics in cemetery. She would take me because she believed in cleaning off the plot, whatever those are, the plot,
Yeah.
the brass things,
The
whatever.
waste of money, the way I see it in land. Just saying. Totally. I think
Listen, the cemetery where my grandparents are, my great grandparents, the brass that you put the vase, the brass vase, they're all stolen. So my husband's like forbid me to go to the cemetery because there's people that have been mugged and like robbed. Yeah,
that's
like
wild.
not because it used to be a good neighborhood, but it's not a great neighborhood now. So you have to be really careful. So he's like, But as a kid, we would go once a week. She would bring me my, Krispy Kreme chocolate frosted donut and my chocolate milk because can you tell I like chocolate? And she'd pick me up from school, and that's what she'd bring. And we would go and we'd have like a little picnic, or she'd bring watermelon or whatever. And she would clean off the headstones. That's what they are, the headstones. And we would, she'd pick the weeds, and we would just talk, and she'd tell me about the different people, and we'd walk to the different, I mean, we would walk the whole cemetery. It wasn't just our relatives. She was taking care of, oh well, this was the church secretary, and this is, this person, and that's just the way that it was done back then, which is so different than the way things are, done now.
Well, I mean, just to preface for the audience, the reason I take issue with cemeteries is we actually, if we were just buried naturally, we would then turn into fossil fuels, which is what, I believe
Mhm.
we're meant to do. So that's my only thing about that is, you know, fine, bury me if you want, but like just let me decompose the way I'm meant to so that
Bury
I
you
can
with a
give
tree.
back
Yeah,
from.
with the tree, like, and then they plant you and then you become part of the tree. Like,
Oh, that's so cute. Christy used to get super pumped. Wait, we'd get the what's kalava? Kali-
oh, Kaliva. Kaliva is these wheat berries, and she has the she has the ingredients, but it's all this like natural stuff and
Twister
raisins.
and natural stuff? No.
And you would go to church and you would get they'd give you a cup of it because it would be like a cake, and they put like powdered sugar on it, but it's not a cake. It's all these wheat berry salad and raisins and almonds. Exactly. And so you would go, but as when she was little, she would just get the cups and then she'd go back for another cup and then another cup. Not really knowing what exactly it was for, but it was to, it's usually done 40 days after someone passes to,
Huh.
yeah.
Good to know. They used
Interesting
to make
conversation
what?
considering Easter is Sunday.
Huh.
Huh.
So yeah, that's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And,
well, we
yeah.
never know where this is gonna go anyway. So,
So you were saying about your uncle and funerals
well, yeah, I
and
mean,
cemeteries.
well, well, we were talking about decomposing bodies, but
Yeah. Well.
it's interesting at this funeral, my niece brought
Mhm.
her almost 1 year old to the funeral, and
Mhm.
he's an almost 1 year old, and she was so anxious about the fact that he's one and he's busy. I took him right up front with me, and I had the greatest time in the pews with the Bibles. And interestingly enough, my great aunt, who's
Mhm.
burying, her husband, walked by, and of course I have him hanging by the side of the pew as casket goes by, and she grabbed him and looked at me and she's like, I love that you brought him because with death comes new life, and this is a new life. And I'm like, yes, see, you get it. And I think, it is really truly important that people recognize, first off, death to me is just a beautiful a part of our transition
Mhm.
into what I believe is even further expansion into wherever, because we don't know, right? Love,
Mhm.
I guess that's the best way to describe it. Um, but secondly, in our society, we have created this culture around fear around death and like this sad loss. And I think I've mentioned this before. I am
Mhm.
closer to my sister today,
Yes.
absolutely bar none, than I was when she was physically here.
Yeah.
And so I just feel very differently. So me being at that church was just kind of um a beautiful expression of celebration of
Mhm.
just transition rather than like this mourning, deep seated sense of loss and suffering because I will no longer see my uncle.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. And truth be told, the Barone family, we've had a passing this week, so it's death is on the mind, transition is on the mind. And I think what's so important in what you said is the only way we're going to be able to accept death, we're dying every day, I mean, hello, is to take the fear away from it. And how do you take fear away? You talk about it. You talk about it and you make it part of normal, like you did with bringing the 1 year old, or my grandmother bringing me. Going to a funeral was never like this bad thing for me. It was like, okay, we get to see the relatives or the friends and the family, and we get to talk about the person, and we get to rejoice in the stories. And there's nothing wrong with laughing, by the way, in a funeral home, or enjoying seeing everybody. It's those stories. And I think what's more important is those stories when the person is still there, if
Mhm.
possible, which isn't always possible. But if it is possible and the person's in the room, even if they're not awake or they're not, um, all there. Maybe they don't remember. Just hearing the voices and hearing the life going on around them helps them process their life. It's how they have to go through their journey to transition, whatever it is that you believe. And we all have our own beliefs about death and transition and where you go. But if you're laying there and I don't know, there's something about life going on around me and me still being able to be part of it if I was there. And we can't ask them afterwards. I mean, we can, because they can still connect with us through song, sending us messages, cardinals or a dragonfly that flies over.
I just saw a cardinal today. And, it's interesting. We heal in communion. So I have no issue coming
Mhm,
together collectively. And I was just talking to somebody the other day. If you look at any spiritual texts, what are they? They're stories. Why?
mhm,
Because we connect through story, through word, and even before the written word, it was verbal. But I do want to call attention to a message that we got, and I loved it.
mhm,
But the one thing, if I may lovingly just encourage you to consider just a shift in perspective a little
mhm,
bit, and it actually ties into what I want to bring up today. So this works beautifully. It's Spedhead. Um,
mhm,
we sit in judgment of ourselves when we stumble upon the thing, meaning, right? So you shared that you sat in and you were sorry and you apologized for not checking this box lately.
mhm,
What I have come to believe is true for
mhm,
me,
mhm,
but I do practice this a lot with my clients who I work within addiction recovery and mental health recovery, is instead of sitting in judgment
mhm.
for not going to the box recently, shift to gratitude for being reminded that you have the box and you have the ability to open up that
Yeah,
prayer. And the reason why: judgment keeps you stuck in the past, gratitude keeps you in the present, and the present is where you want to be to shift and sit into healing. Right?
absolutely.
So I would just encourage you to consider that. Now, talking about how that plays into what I wanted to bring up today, because it came up several times with clients this week, is judgment around their intensity of feeling as they're moving through something. So one of my clients was sharing to me with me that they felt that they were becoming more bitchy and intolerant, because and their emotional response was not congruent to the experience they were having,
Mhm,
right? And what I said to this person, and I know this to be true for myself as well as others, is if you have been disassociated from your emotions, if you
yep,
have not allowed yourself to feel your feelings for any extent of time, whether it's years, months, weeks, hours,
mhm,
right? Then when you do start to come out of that, um you know trapping, so to speak, that not allowing yourself to feel those feelings, they are going to be heightened, because you're not only going to be
mhm,
feeling anger around your daughter yelling at you, because you're allowing yourself to feel your emotions. Now you're feeling anger because you're feeling anger, right? So
mhm,
picking up all that energy that's been trapped within you, and it's going to be expressed, and it's going to seemingly feel that maybe it is out of proportion with the situation, but it's not, right? And the reason why is you're now allowing yourself to feel your feelings. And that is
yes,
critically important, particularly, guys, when we're looking at the fact that people numb out using mental health medication, uh, drugs, alcohol, shopping, their phone. I mean, you name it.
everything.
Most people don't actually sit like you and I, Michelle, and say, "Oh, oh, I'm feeling a little bit of sun right there. I gotta feel it." And so when you start doing that, it's gonna feel like it's not proportionate, but it is. And just know that it will eventually subside to a place where, when I feel my feelings, I feel them for like a half a second, and then I'm
Mhm,
on to joy again, right?
yeah,
I recognize it, I feel it, and I'm moving on. But if you haven't done that yet, you are going to feel them. And just like the box where you were sitting in judgment of yourself for not looking at it, don't
Mhm.
judge yourself. Just be grateful.
Be
Be grateful
grateful.
that you get to feel your feeling, because now you're moving forward and
Mhm.
really healing, rather than just sitting in a place of suffering.
Right. And to your point, it's like it's gonna be calm again, and you have to trust and you have to have faith in that. When you take a big old boulder and you drop it in the water, it's gonna create a really big wave. If you take a pebble and drop it in, it's
Mhm.
gonna create a little ripple. If you've been holding back your emotions, it's gonna be the big boulder.
Yep.
Hold on tight to your little to your boat, your life boat, your preserver, whatever you're in, but it will subside.
Yeah.
But you have to allow it to subside. So allow the feelings to come up. And the more you practice that, then it'll start going into those little ripples and you won't have as many boulders. And
Yep.
that's what, I love helping people see that and come to terms with that instead of, because as we push and push and push our emotions down, that's what's creating those big old boulders.
Yep.
But if you allow them to
Absolutely.
come up, you're good. Allow it to come up in the shower and wash it away. But do what you have to do to allow those to come up. Don't judge yourself for feeling.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is when you sit in judgment, you're keeping yourself in the past. Like you're actually perpetuating those experiences in the future, because this moment right
Yeah.
now is creating the future, you know? And so I really wanted to touch upon that, because it's something that comes up so often.
Mhm.
And with judgment, generally speaking, comes guilt. And I cannot emphasize enough for anybody and everybody watching, guilt is the most useless, unproductive emotion that we can exist in, because it doesn't allow us to learn, it doesn't allow us to grow, it doesn't allow
Mhm.
us to um yeah, move forward.
Yeah. Exactly. I was looking at what she wrote. I was sorry it was on the floor. I laughed and praised him and gave thanks, but I appreciate the room. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter if it's on the floor, it doesn't matter if it's in your closet behind everything tucked away. When it's meant to come out, when it's meant for you to find it, how many times have you lost something and then found it at the exact moment you needed it, wanted it, or it was a reminder for you? So it's just perfect timing. It's and you just have to have that faith and that trust that whatever's meant to be will be.
Mm. It's interesting. This person, Spedhead,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
uh talked about studying the difference between guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you, and this is going to be controversial, because I work in addiction recovery, and there are a lot of schools of thought that say guilt can help you get sober and help you move forward. And I cannot emphasize enough, right? Shame is just as detrimental and toxic, but guilt does not serve you either. It just doesn't. And from having overcome a myriad of addictions, and I mean addiction to everything, and suffering from severe anxiety, depression, and a lot of trauma, it wasn't until I started to give myself permission to get curious and not beat myself up about whatever it is that I was
Mm-hmm.
sitting in that moment, that I really started to shift out. And so that's why, to me, it's really important to come from a place of curiosity, um
Mm-hmm.
rather than judgment. Because here's the thing, judgment is going to tell you that something's good or bad, but that is so not the case. How can we, as humans with this small, like, what is it? They say 10% of our brain is actually working.
Mm-hmm.
How can we, with 10% of this being actually operating, make that call whether something is good or bad. We can't. And so um it's just interesting. So
Yeah.
I keep reading. Yes.
And I'm gonna say before we continue on, and T, I'll just say T because I Spedhead is her name starts with T. I'll just call her T. Uh, before we go back into that, I'm going to say that the word I think we both agree on, that's not, it's not about shame and guilt. It's about forgiveness. And it's
Mhm.
not
Absolutely.
asking for others forgiveness, and we've talked about this a bit. It's actually asking for forgiveness for yourself. And that's the important part. The guilt and the shame, throw that shit out the window. Because, and the other thing I wanted to say was, are there really any, is there any really negative energy, right? So negative experiences. And I get there's shitty things that happen. We don't know if they're negative or positive until and we can't fast forward our life to see, but we don't know what the purpose was. And like you said, you have to get curious. What am I supposed to learn from this experience? Because
Mhm.
that's all we have, our experiences, neither good, neither bad. What am I supposed to learn from this? And then how do we apply it? Yes, Tia. It's about how we apply that and move forward.
So it's interesting. First off, thank you, Tia, for sharing. I really appreciate that. And you're right. It can be very, very difficult. Um, but I just actually, so I was on a walk, and I took my my client calls on a walk today. I really was called to move my body, and one of my clients. We were 15 minutes in, and my client found peace. Like, we got to peace, and I
Mm-hmm.
said, "We got to hang up." I was like, "You're at peace." And this is truly where our thinking mind gets us into trouble. If you look at scripture, you shared scripture. I've studied scripture. I am steeped in it. It's that quantum physics and neuroscience, because all of it is the same, just in different language.
So good.
Um, Scripture will tell you, the original sin is separation from love, that we're already whole.
Yep.
And so, if that's the case and we're whole, then it's our job to find peace, to come to joy. And if we can sit in joy and peace, we are one. We're one. So the minute I can bring somebody to peace, and they're like, and I know they're at peace, we're done. We're done for the day. Because what's the point in talking about any of this stuff when you've already accomplished oneness with source? And
Yeah.
if you can hold and maintain that, right? Forget
Mm-hmm.
about it. You're now no longer in the past. So, and in A Course of Miracles, which, you can tell I just read a little bit, it talks about the fact that a miracle is literally, um, it's basically removing any of the suffering from your past, keeping the joy, keeping any of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you've done in love, bringing that forward and leaving the rest back. And when you can hold space for that, you're good to go. And that's
Yeah.
why when I jumped on, I was at peace. I was totally peaced out, and I could feel the energy of you and Krista. And because I was just so tapped in,
Right.
tuned in, I was like, "Oh, I'm at peace," and that
Mm-hmm.
is all we really have to focus on. Now, that takes work, it takes effort. And I know you're going to
Mm-hmm.
say work is like, but it's not. And I was actually just reading how it says there's a lot of discomfort in figuring that out, people, because
Yes.
you have to combat two different perspectives. And
Mm-hmm.
you have two perspectives: one's love, one's fear. Love's going to bring you peace and joy, fear is going to bring you suffering. The minute you catch yourself in suffering, you release it, and then you're back into love, and then you just sit with that.
Yeah. When you were talking, what popped into my head was I got a picture of a puzzle. So separation, that was where, things we separated. And that's, now we have to find our puzzle pieces to put us back together, to bring into, to be into, and live in love and joy in order to find our true connection to source, God, divine. And that's our only purpose and mission here. That's the only thing that we are here to do, is to find our puzzle pieces, put them back together, so that way we are one. That's
Mm.
it. That's it. That's as simple as it is. And whatever experiences are going to bring you towards that mission, right? That goal is on your path. But if it's taking you backwards, meaning you're now taking a puzzle piece and breaking it in half, and now you're creating more puzzle pieces versus putting your puzzle together. So, what's moving you forward and what's taking you backwards?
Well, it's interesting. This is something I would say too that I really understand. We're good, and you know this because we've talked
Mhm.
extensively about it. We're gonna repeat the lessons until we learn the lesson.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
here's the crux of it. And this is where I still get hung up at times, but much less now. Rather than being in judgment of having to repeat the lesson, this is where I'm like, I'm gonna get it. Be like, oh my God, thank you for the lesson. I get it. I'm gonna let it go. And I had that today. Like, there were many, many moments on my walk, right? That I was in peace. And then
Hmm.
my ego was like, oh no, baby, you're not gonna sit in peace. And I'm like, oh no, baby, I'm gonna sit in peace. So it was like this, but I just kept, instead of fighting with the fact that I was having to do this dance, I'm like, oh, we can do this all day. I'm just gonna keep recognizing and releasing, and that I kept coming back to peace.
And look at how quickly you now can do that versus probably a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, it's so
I
true.
mean, right. And the more you do it, the bigger the pieces come together. And therefore, you have less pieces to actually put together because they're bigger pieces and they're fitting together. And so you're moving to completion,
Mm.
which is oneness.
And that's the thing, is it's something that I really want to tell everybody. You really are. You, I mean, I think about Joe Dispenza's work, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Superhuman and all this. We really already are the miracle. We really are. We really are whole, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that to create miracles, and now we can well, I'll touch slightly upon manifestation, because we are co-creators with our creator. We just are. But we need to co-create from a place of joy and
Mm-hmm.
love. And when you can sit in love and joy, I mean, that's essentially what Jesus talks about
Right.
when he says, you can create in the likeness of me. There's nothing that I can do that you can't.
Right.
But if you think about it, he sat in joy, in this complete
Yeah.
knowing. And even as he was being crucified, and this is the thing in A Course in Miracles that's so, so critical, that they say, if you don't believe, then that miracle then becomes magic, and it's so he knew as he was shedding his body that he was going to come back, because he believed with every fiber of his being. And so there you go. And then on Sunday, many religions will celebrate him being risen. Right now, I'm not religious, and I don't buy into religious ideology, but it's it there's proof that there was this man that walked the earth that was able
Absolutely.
to heal through touch. I mean, even I think it's Saint John, no, some saint of Assisi, which I've read his
Mhm.
stuff. He walked through fire in front of the Roman Catholic Pope, and freaked him out, and it was because he believed.
Right. And we all have the ability, just like we have the ability to touch and heal, just like, Jesus. It's Reiki, it's any kind of energy work. We all have the ability. We just don't remember, or we haven't tapped into it yet.
Well, also, something that keeps coming to me this week is you cannot heal until you're healed. And
Well,
if you look at so many of the healers, and this is why it's interesting, even let's talk about Muhammad, right?
mm-hmm,
Wrote the Quran. He came from a place of understanding and stuff, but if he didn't constantly do the work,
mm-hmm,
then he fell back into ego, and that is where you get the holy wars, because there in
yeah,
no real scripture and nothing in quantum physics proves it. If from an energetic standpoint, love is whatever amount, 440 whatever times more
mm-hmm,
powerful than fear, right? Then we know that there's no scripture that says that we should be coming from a place of fear. But if we are not constantly looking at and course correcting our internal state to sit in joy and peace, we are not healed. And as such, we are not healing. And that
mm-hmm,
is just truth. That is fact. Because I look at so many people who, quote unquote, have been healers who have fallen pretty far from their place, because they're not constantly doing the work. And that's the gift I love about my mama Dukes. Because my mama taught me you can read anything you want, but if you ain't doing the work every single day, every
yeah.
minute, then you ain't healing.
And yes, Mama Dukes, and if you are going to lay hands, do Reiki, do whatever, and you are in a negative energy, if you are choosing to not do the work and you're in that negative energy, you will then be a detriment to that person, even though you think you might be helping, you're not, because you're not in a space of love. You're not in a space of positive energy. You can't give positive energy if you're sitting in negative energy. You have to do the work on yourself first. Then you can help others. Then you can spread that energy. But
Well,
check yourself
also,
first.
I think it's even more important to highlight that what you do to somebody else, you do to yourself.
Well,
It's funny. I'm
yeah,
gonna, my daughter,
absolutely.
my daughter, 14 years old, she's yesterday, she's talking to me, and she's talking to me about how frustrated she is with her history teacher, because all he does is talk about the Palestinian Israeli war, and he clearly has sides. And she has her side too. And I just started chuckling, and she's like, I know, mom, you don't care. But I was like, no, 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 do not get it twisted. I understand the universal laws, and the universal law is cause and effect, baby. This isn't good or bad, right or wrong. This is, if you send out negative energy, that negative energy is coming back at you, and vice versa. And this is
Mhm.
where people get in it's like two bulls
Right.
walked into, it's like, nope, I'm going to send out this energy, and then I'm going to send out this energy. And then I'm like, that is the biggest issue at hand. So I said to my daughter, and she was like, I know, I'm working on it. I was like, all you have to understand is what you, as an
Mhm.
individual but full expression of energy, send out is coming back to you. And if you don't want to sit in suffering, you got to be really careful about what you're putting out there. And that
Right.
comes to everything with how you have relationships, but
Mhm.
also, very importantly, how you show up in the work that you do as a healer. Because really, we're all students, and we're all teachers, and we're all healing each other, but it's got to come from a very strong understanding that there is no idle thought. All thoughts extend, and all thoughts have the power to either create
Mhm.
or cause fear, which is really an illusion, but most people sit in that fear, so that's hard to understand.
Right. Right. And being curious of why that person is having those feelings, opinion, or judgments, not to agree or disagree, but to understand where they're at. So, like the history teacher, he must have a side, he must have strong feelings. I can respect his feelings or his what he's been through, his experiences, but they're not mine.
Mhm.
And when, like you said, when you come from a place of love and you just, no judgment, this is how you feel, that's yours. It's not mine.
Well, I piss people off because I've learned because I really do respect. I respect we're all on our journey, and there's levels of consciousness. So there's levels of peeling back that layer. And I mean, 20 years ago, I was entrenched with all of Brene Brown's work. I have
Mhm.
infinite respect for her, and yet now to now, I view like what I learned then very differently because I have a stronger understanding. So for me, it's not about asking questions about where people are. It's one of two things. You're either in love or fear. Boom. I
Mhm.
already got my answer. How you show up in any interaction with me is fear or love. And I'm going to tell you right now, if I feel walls up,
Mhm.
I know it's fear. And it can be anything from not being able to have a conversation with me. You know how
Mhm.
many people won't pick up the phone and say, and I reach out, or it can be and so I don't personalize it. I'm like, ooh, ooh, I get it. And that's cool. And then I have to choose because I still contend with ego. I
Mhm.
still have my own work to do. I have to choose. Okay, first I have to examine what part of this is mine because
Right.
never interact with anybody else if you're
That's
not
not a
projecting
reflection.
that.
Right. Exactly.
And then what do I need to do to come to love so that in the future I'm not going to be experiencing that situation with people. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so good. It's just so good.
I know
I love our
we
conversation.
have great conversations.
And I wouldn't even say that, you know, you're a disruptor. Like, it's not that you piss people off the way I take it. You challenge, you disrupt a pattern, a thought pattern to elicit change.
Well, I do piss people
Well,
off
well, of course, that's the reality of it, but I
because if
don't
you're
think
not
you
mad,
go
you're not going
in
to change.
right, because anger, you can take the energy of anger and turn it into action.
Yep.
When I see you as a disruptor to elicit change, to
Mm.
inspire change. What that person decides to do with that energy is up to them. If they decide to feel pissed off and anger, they're going to take the negative fear side. They could take your disruptive energy and go, positive, and go that way. So you're giving them an opportunity to make their decision just like you're making your
Yeah.
decision. So
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, I think we both do that. I literally was on the phone this morning with a client and I kept holding up my pretty wand, but I was using it as stick and going, which side of the stick do you want to be on?
Yeah.
Do you want to be on the negative or do you want to be on the positive? And how can we flip it? So if you are on the negative, what do you need to know, feel, experience, have faith in, trust in to get to the more positive side? And people forget that we have that choice. I'd rather avoid anger as much as possible. My daughter called me
Woo!
kind of,
So,
well, that's confusing.
who you want to touch us, or do you want me to?
You start, I'll go in. I'm still trying to. Okay, and my daughter called
All
me.
right. So,
Okay, to fault. That's confusing. Okay,
all
go
right.
ahead.
So, I would. You put it out there. That's spiritual bypassing. How do you heal if you don't feel? Like
Hmm.
you now get don't get me wrong, you don't have to outwardly express anger because if you're not looking at your anger, how can you look at what it is internally? Because the only time we get
Hmm.
angry really, right, is if we feel we're not getting a need met. Now,
Right.
for me, that need is like really unpacked now. So I already know I can serve myself. I literally need nobody to take care of me, right? I am whole. I can,
Hmm.
but there's still that ego that says that I need some external whatever, right?
Hmm.
if you're not feeling that anger, that is a feeling, right? It has to be a feeling. Then how are you learning yourself? How are you able to learn what it is you need? And more than that, how do you get your needs met, right? Because
Right.
that's really important. And the other thing, particularly as women, but men too, we are taught, conditioned, and embedded to believe that we need to be caretakers at the expense of our own wellness. And
Mhm.
that is detrimental to the overall environment of the whole world. Because if to what you said earlier, if you aren't healed, you have nothing to offer to heal. I know when I need to take care of me, and I have no problem even telling my daughter, "Baby, I am not available right now because I have nothing to give, and if I do give, it's going to come from resentment,
Mhm.
it's going to come from frustration." And sure, I'm giving, but I'm giving from a negative energy, and that's going to come bite me in the ass.
Right. Right. And here's the thing. Do we all wish that no one felt anger? That we didn't have anger, that things didn't come up to piss us off? Yeah, absolutely. That would be wonderful if life was just picture perfect. Can you learn how to manage your emotions enough that when you start to feel anger, you can get curious like we've talked about and
Yeah.
go, okay, why am I feeling anger? Why is this coming up for me? And then acknowledge it, and then you address the issue, because if somebody else is making you angry, you're allowing them to make you angry. Why are you allowing them to make you angry? If they're being pissy about something, let them be pissy about it if that's where they're at. You
Yeah.
cannot change other people just like other people can't change you. And so anger is there, as I always say, like a freaking check engine light on your car. If it comes up, you've got to check it. Why? Why is this coming up for me? What is it about the person or the situation that's making me angry? Take a look within, acknowledge it, address it, let it go, and transmute that energy into something positive. What?
Like
Because yeah,
creating boundaries. So I'm going to tell you,
yes.
particularly, I mean, and this goes straight across the board. As a corporate leader, as a mother, as a coach, as all the things, right? I absolutely know that a lot of anger comes from the fact that people do not have boundaries, strong boundaries, and most importantly, guys, boundaries are incredibly important for yourself. Most people, it's not about me having a boundary with Michelle about, hey, Michelle, whatever. It's about me having the boundary that I'm not going to tolerate Michelle speaking to me in a certain way. And I'm not going to pop off on Michelle, but I am going to say, you know what? This conversation doesn't feel good for me. So I'm going to excuse
Mhm.
myself. Or, you know what? This is something that's really important that I need for us to establish a strong relationship. And if you can't deliver that, cool beans. My job isn't to change you, but
Mhm.
it is to find a relationship that serves me. And the same with kids, right? We as parents, we want to give to our kids. We don't create boundaries with our children, and you see it all over right now. You see it. And as a result, kids have this expectation of parents, and my kids know, like, first off, mom needs to practice her spiritual studies in the morning. I'm not available.
Mhm.
And a lot of people like, well, no, 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 I'm not available, because when I am available for my children, I am the most present, I
Mhm.
am clear, I am loving, and I am able to bear witness to their experiences in a way that isn't trying to project mine onto them. I couldn't do that if I didn't have boundaries. So anger is a beautiful way to remember that. Are you creating
Mhm.
boundaries? If you have, are they in place? Have you walked it? Because most people, it takes practice like anything else. And then also, boundaries change. You
Yes.
change. So the things that felt good at one point in your life don't have to feel good now, and it's okay to be like, you know what? Nope, I don't want to do that anymore.
And it can be the opposite too.
Yes,
You can be doing the work on yourself, and then you don't need the boundary because whatever it was that was affecting you isn't
does it?
affecting you anymore
Yeah.
because you've already worked through it,
Yep.
and you've realized that it's just not important. Like if there's a person that always pisses you off or they sit in judgment of you and you put a boundary up, maybe you work through it and their opinion of you doesn't matter anymore. And so it doesn't, so, and the more you live in your light, in your love, from a place of love, all the negativity will start to just taper off and fall by the wayside.
It does. You're
And
right.
that's when you have the right tribe of people surrounding you. All of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, this person from my past came back and they're so wonderful. And all these things can happen. You just got to drop the negativity and the fear and just be in love. And you have to ask yourself, am I doing this from a place of love? Am I doing it from a place of ego? Because ego and fear and anger all go hand in
Well,
hand.
the thing is, though, I do want to circle back, right? You can't spiritually bypass. You cannot not feel anger, sadness,
No.
frustration, whatever. Um, Like, and that's what I see a lot of people is
Mhm.
specifically who are into the metaphysical world and stuff do, is they're like, "Oh, I'm happy, fluffy, rainbow," but that's not true. Like, you come back to love fast. Like, I come back to love
Yeah.
ridiculously quick. I recognize it, I analyze it, and I'm back
Mhm.
into love in less than 10 seconds. It's probably even less now, right? But there was a time where it took me days and days. It's a
Right.
continued practice till you get there. But so important that true unconditional love is unconditional love for the feelings you're experiencing too, and the
Mhm.
messy middle that helps you get
Yeah.
there. And you're going to continue to like, again, it's a life, death, life cycle in this world. We're constantly going through it all, life, death, life, death, life, death.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
really important.
And I think that on the unconditional love, the step, the step we also have to go through to get to unconditional love is the unconditional acceptance of
Yes.
ourselves and of other people where they're at, not accepting their behavior as right or wrong, accepting that that is who that person is, they've shown me their true self. But can you also see their pure self? Can you see their self that's sitting in love but can't get out of the anger and the muck? Can you see their pureness that's connected to you through light and love? And if you can come to them in that frame of mind, then your anger isn't good. You won't get as angry because
Well, yeah,
you'll
because
be
you see that
in right.
you see that they're struggling with their own fear. And it's interesting. My other daughter called me yesterday. She wanted to get picked up from school. Her girlfriend was avoiding her all day because the prior night they had a fight. Now Julia has me for a mother, so she's highly emotionally intelligent. Lots of kids don't have parents who teach their kids that level of intelligence, and so her girlfriend was avoiding her out of fear, out of anxiety. Now I knew this, but I also said to Jules, I'm like, babe, you don't have to have a crappy day because she's avoiding you. You don't have to take on her experience. You can sit and enjoy. Now she's 16, so she literally her response was, "Yeah, like it's that easy." And I was like, "Well, really, it is."
It is.
But
Bye, Tia. Thank you.
thank you so much. Yes, and what a blessing to have you
Yes.
here. We appreciate it. But I literally, it is that easy, but I gave her grace. I'm like, it's your experience, baby.
Mhm.
You get to have a crap day or a good day, regardless of
Your
how your
choice.
girlfriend is feeling. And of course, fast forward, they talked it out, and sure enough, it was just that I knew her girlfriend just didn't know how. She doesn't have the skills to have healthy conflict resolution. And so there was that avoidance factor, which is simple fear. And once they were able to talk about it, they both learned and grew. But
Right.
it's always fear. And I would tell this to anybody watching, at the end of the day, if you're not sitting in joy and peace, you're in fear. You
Hmm.
just are, no matter how you slice it. And it's okay if you don't know how to get out of that fear. It's okay if that even seems confusing. I don't, a lot of people, even that. I mean, my father, I've told him before he's in fear, and that enraged him.
Yeah.
And so I recognize that, but just understand that even that awareness gives you the ability to give yourself grace, because instead of judging yourself for any of your emotions or all of the experiences you're having, you can at least be like, oh, well, maybe I just am afraid and I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be in judgment of anybody else either. Just unconditional acceptance of that's where they are. I can't fix them. It's not my job. It's not my journey, not my circus, not my monkeys. And you just go about your day
Yep.
and keep yourself where you need to, in grace, in love, in light, and sometimes in anger, and work through it.
Definitely.
So, where can people find you, Miss Kerri?
Kerri Lewis Coach, and my phone number is on the website. Give me a call. I love good, unexpected, yummy conversations, just like the one we have on Wednesdays.
I love these conversations. You can find me at mokshagrace.com and on social media under Moksha Grace, just about anywhere. And yeah, thank you all for being here to have these conversations with us. And we will see you next week. Yes, same time, right here.
Awesome.